Okay, in Unit 12, Part 1, we're going to talk about how the Renaissance gets started. What are the factors that impacted happening? And what are some reasons why it started in Italy? These are all things that we're going to be talking about. And then, like I said, one of the big things that we're going to talk about is, as we get into the John Green video on the Renaissance, is the Renaissance really a thing? I don't know. It's a good question, I think. And so we'll talk about that some more in the video and in class. So hope you enjoy.
Okay, welcome to Unit 12, Part 1. This is the foundation of the Renaissance, why the Renaissance happens and where it happens. Although I will tell you, in the John Green video we'll watch in this unit, he makes a really good argument whether there really was a Renaissance or not, which I think is a really good question. Okay, so here's the idea. We're going to identify the economic foundations of the Italian Renaissance in this video. Okay, so what were the economic effects or economic factors that led to the Renaissance? Well, first we have to start with the Crusades, because what happened was, after the Crusades, there was a demand for Middle Eastern products. You know, things like spices and other things, and silks that came from the Middle East. And this stimulated production of goods in the European market as well to trade with them, and herring and cloth and different things like that are also going to be traded back and forth. And so what happened was, the people who started these business and started these trade businesses were encouraged to use credit and banking to establish their businesses. And so a whole new business of credit and banking comes out of this. Now, this is also going to run into some problems with the church. Okay. So what happened was, the church came out against the use of usury, which is basically the practice of charging interest. And so what happened was, many of the business people in Italy who started to make money off of interest basically came out and said, well, the church is wrong here. And it helped to secularize, or when something's secular, it means that it is not church related. It helped them to push away from the church's control of things quite a bit in northern Italy. Letters of credit served to expand the supply of money, and it expedited these trade organizations. And then new accounting and bookkeeping practices finally came in and were introduced. The biggest of which was the use of Arabic numerals, which in some Italian city-states were actually deemed illegal for a while, because they felt like they were too easy to be manipulated, and that if the Muslim people had come up with them, there must be something evil behind them. And so the Arabic numerals played a role in these new economic concepts.
When Islam departed Western Europe in the 15th century, it left behind a legacy, one that would have a deep and lasting impact on the Mediterranean and the entire world. It wasn't just cities like Cordoba or palaces such as the Alhambra. Muslims introduced many objects which we now think of as Western. In 1100, they brought the first paper from China, replacing the parchment made from animal skins used in Europe at the time. But the Arabs gave Europe more than things. They also brought learning and culture unknown to the West. Their own highly developed mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. It was Muslims, not Europeans, who had preserved and translated the classical texts of ancient Greece and Rome. They'd kept the wisdom of the ancients safe and added to it. All this was key to a scientific and cultural revolution. A 16th century art historian gave it a name: the rebirth, the Renaissance. The Renaissance took off in wealthy Italian cities such as Florence. True to its talent of borrowing the best from other cultures, the Mediterranean now began to rediscover its own past and reinvent it for a modern world. The Renaissance produced some of the greatest names in Western art and science. Michelangelo's sculpture reinvented the classical art of ancient Greece. Man and his world, portrayed with stunning naturalism. Leonardo da Vinci was the original Renaissance man, so much more than the sum of his parts. Sculptor, scientist, and engineer. He also produced some of the greatest paintings of all time. The great Renaissance cities competed for preeminence in commerce and culture.
Okay, so the Renaissance. It starts with the idea that it's the rebirth of Greek and Roman ideas. But it's more than that, because it happens in art and literature, but it's also going to be important to the idea of the individual being important. But Renaissance itself means rebirth, and we're talking about rebirth of Greek and Roman ideas. The Renaissance will get its start in the 14th century Italy. And there's mainly going to be 3 city-states that play a role in this, and we'll talk more about that here in the video. So the first thing I want you to do is tell me, how did the Crusades affect new banking techniques that affect us today? In other words, what are their impact on us today? Okay, so what were the causes of the Italian Renaissance? Why did it happen in Italy? Well, Roman ruins were located in Italy, so people already had a feeling of the past. And Crusades brought people into contact with the Byzantine Empire, who had saved many of the works of the Greeks and Romans. Trade brought them into contact with Asian and Arab countries, who had saved many of the works of the Greeks and Romans. And then here's the big thing. All this new business caused by the trade industry created a group of citizens that were very, very wealthy. And they got this off this newly expanded trade. And they were becoming educated and increasingly secular. In other words, they wanted to learn things outside of what the church was teaching. All right, now the whole idea of the Renaissance is based on a concept called humanism. Humanism is the idea that every person has dignity and worth, and that each person can better themselves. And the best way to do this is by studying those classic Greek and Roman ideas: philosophy, science, math, everything. The humanities come out of this movement, like we study in college today. All things human: history, logic, philosophy, psychology, and others. The symbol up in the right is supposed to be the international symbol for the humanities, or humanism. Okay, so how did the Renaissance happen in Italy? First, European trade with the Middle East had led to the rise of several powerful Italian city-states. And families and different groups of people within each of those city-states provided power. One particular trade business family, the Medicis of Florence, led the Renaissance there. A group of leaders called Doges in Venice led the Renaissance in that city-state. And then popes, yes, the Catholic Church, actually sponsored a great deal of the Renaissance in Rome. Okay, now all of them had access to trade routes connecting Europe with the Middle Eastern markets. And they served as trading centers for distribution of goods to Northern Europe. So they were basically go-betweens between the Middle Eastern markets and into Northern Europe. Now, initially, they were independent city-states, and they were governed as republics. And individual supporters also played a role in sponsoring the Renaissance. One of the most famous was a patron known as Isabella d'Este, a beautiful young lady who supported many Renaissance artists and causes. And it was different people in Italy like this that helped make the Renaissance happen there. Okay, so on your notes, why was Italy an ideal place for the Renaissance to start? You can do that right here in your notes. Okay, so what are the big ideas of this video? The first, that the Crusades stimulated trade by introducing Europeans to many desirable products and introduced new business practices. The second is wealth accumulated from European trade with the Middle East led to the rise of Italian city-states. And wealthy merchants were active civic leaders, so they played a role in the government as well. And then the fact that education became increasingly secular, which limited the control that the church had up until now. Okay, hope you enjoyed the video.